United States and Ireland participating in a 2-match series. This was billed as the final set of international matches for the United States women's national team before a final World Cup roster is named. So no pressure. There was just a lot of there was a lot. There was a lot of emphasis on that coming out of both these two games, and obviously even more so of this second match now that it's done and dusted and put to rest. But the energy, I think, in this game was a little bit different. I think the backdrop and the environment in itself was, I think, where you start. I think in our preview, Lisa, we talked a little bit about that because there was a lot of excitement about Becky Sauerbrun's return to St. Louis and the celebration of her 200 caps. And it was really cool to see all that in action and in person, and a very, very good crowd set up in this facility. Over 20,000.
Insane. 22,294 is what they reported out of City Park for this match. Fantastic, and definitely a big Becky Sauerbrunn contingency there, as that's her hometown. She was also honored before the match for her 200 caps, but she's now on 215, I think, or 216, something like that, 215. So really incredible to see that and kind of get into it. And as we talk about this game, I do want to hear kind of how that crowd was and how things went. You being on the ground in St. Louis gives a different perspective than those of us that watched on television or on our digital streams. But in previewing this second friendly for the United States against Ireland, you and I talked about the starting lineup, who we wanted to get minutes and who needed to get minutes, and then who we thought would get minutes. And initially I put it out there that I didn't think Becky Sauerbrunn was going to get minutes because she didn't need them. She's going to the World Cup. She's a lock. You know what she can get. And you reminded me, because I just wasn't thinking, hey, she's going home. She's being honored for her 200 caps. And I was like, right. So we did see Becky Sauerbrunn get the start, but she only played about 28 minutes, minute management. So I like to think I was both right and wrong, but I was right. He really only played because she was going home, right? And it was the pomp and circumstance of it.
I mean, in fairness to you, I'm going to say that you were correct. Chatting with Vlatko Andonovski in the post-game conference area, essentially said that they had a lot of things that were mapped out, a specific game plan that they wanted to follow over the course of the two games. And initially, no, Becky Sauerbrunn was not going to start a second consecutive match for this team. But with everything in consideration, the plans for a 200 cap celebration, the return to her hometown, they said, listen, we have to make sure that the city of St. Louis gets a chance to see their hometown hero. I think it was the right call. Didn't play for a long time. I mean, it was evident with that early sub that that was all pre-planned and everything. But I'm glad the coaching staff was able to sort of work that out. I think for that player. I mean, in terms of that starting 11, I was there. I was able to react to it in real time. But I would love to hear from you about this. When you saw this starting 11 drop for the United States, what were some of your first reactions to it? Because when we were previewing this match a little bit, again, you mentioned it. We talked about players who need minutes versus who we think would actually get them versus, the ones that we wanted to see get extra minutes. Were there any surprises in there for you? Who do you think, who were you correct on, in terms of I want to see this player, and then you got to see your wish list fulfilled?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because we weren't sure at the time we recorded our preview. We weren't sure about injury update, what was going to happen. And it came out that Rose Lavelle had a very small minor knock. She even confirmed that on the pregame interviewing with the people at the desk and Shannon Box and whoever else was there, Foudy, Beasley, saying that it was really just a small injury and knock. So Rose Lavelle didn't even dress for this one. I thought she was going to start, but instead it's Ashley Sanchez getting minutes. And I liked that. I think with Sanchez, Herrera, and Sullivan in the midfield, that's a trio that is good to see. I think it's interesting that Sullivan also got the start again. That's what I predicted in that defensive midfield position. Morgan and Smith up top alongside Alyssa Thompson. This was a good one. I like that Alyssa Thompson got the start. She was called in halfway through this camp because of the Mallory Swanson injury. They call in Thompson. This was her first start. She's only played in 2 games, or this was her 3rd cap and her first start. And being at such a young player, I think it's good for her to get that experience to start a game like this. And then across the back line and in goal, I mean, there were 6 changes that Black-Leninowski made for the starting lineup. O'Hara was playing on the left side in defense. We haven't seen Kelly O'Hara play in the left back since 2018 or so. She's been on the right back, a mainstay there. Becky Sauerbrunn, of course, getting the start in the center back, Alana Cook, and then Sophia Huerta across the back line. So Cook and Huerta rotating in for Girma and Fox across that back line, and then Casey Murphy in goal. I loved that Casey Murphy got the start, a full 90 minutes. She earned her 10th career shutout between the sticks for the United States. This was one that I'm really, really glad that Murphy got time, because heading into the World Cup, heading into where Vlach-Leninowski needs to make those roster decisions. Alyssa Nair is your number 1 lock goalkeeper, but you have to have a number 2. You have to have a number 3. And it's shaking out that Murphy is going to be that number 2 and Franch is most likely going to be that number 3. And you want to get them time and experience. So the fact that Nair got full 90 in the first friendly and then Murphy gets full 90 in the second is completely on par with what should be happening. And I want Murphy to get those minutes. That way she's not stepping into a World Cup game, not having played in-game minutes with this team in a couple of months. So I really liked that. But I mean, 6 changes, that's a lot of changes. Yeah. Clearly he wanted to see some players and see what they could do.
Yeah, that was the outlook of this game. I think in the pre-match availability, Andonovski mentioning how the second match was really going to be utilized to evaluate. I think you referred to it as smaller groups of players in the second game, and we got to see a ton of them really between the initial starting 11 and every bit of the substitutions that were used in the game as well. I think that's where we initially heard that, Thompson could likely see minutes in this game. So surprise for you that Thompson got the start in general, but also, apparently over Rodman, because I know that was another player that we mentioned. We were like, oh, here's a player that we want to see, get minutes, and in light of everything that happened with Swanson, but it ends up being Thompson over Rodman, even though Rodman did get into this game. So big surprise there for you?
Yeah, honestly, a little bit. I wanted Rodman to get the start. I think Rodman deserves the start alongside Morgan and Smith. And the way that the first match went for the U.S., as soon as Swanson went down, it was Rodman that stepped in. So in my mind, it makes me believe that Rodman is the likely replacement for Swanson moving forward, which is what we would see in the World Cup starting front line, perhaps, right? There are still some question marks there. But so I wanted him, Vlach-Leninowski, to give the start to Rodman. That way we could see what it would look like. They could see what it would feel like with a Rodman, Morgan, Smith up top at the start of the game. How do they go out of the gate? But instead, it's the youngster in Alyssa Thompson getting the start, which Vlach-Leninowski, I think, was very vocal and open about his decisions that he made for this game, and basically saying, yeah, we wanted to call Thompson in because she didn't have a lot of minutes, and she's making a World Cup roster. We want to see her get minutes now, and she ultimately played full 90 minutes in this game. So I mean, I understand completely where he's coming from, and the logic does make sense, but I still think I would have liked to see Rodman, Morgan, Smith get the start, because we didn't see Rodman, Morgan, Smith play together in this second game at all.
I'm also just sort of curious, like we knew later on, of course, after we did our preview, Rose Lavelle, the announcement that she had picked up a knock, she was not going to get the start. And I think it was safe to assume that we were going to see somebody slot in for her, and it was likely going to be Ashley Sanchez. Thought she had a good game with this team. I thought she showed even more reasons why that she should be one of those players, in contention for a spot on that final World Cup roster. Lindsay Horan, surprised to see her get a second consecutive start. What were your thoughts on that?
Honestly, no, I'm not. This is a player for Vlahovic that is wearing the number 10 jersey. She's an incredibly vocal leader on this team. Not at all surprised to see Lindsay Horan get the start, right? She solidified her spot in that midfield, and so have a lot of other players, right? I argue that Rose Lavelle has as well. But when you're already losing a Lavelle due to that knock, so she's not going to play in this game, you don't want to shake things up too much, and especially when you're making 6 changes around that midfield. No, not at all surprised to see Lindsay Horan get the start. I think she deserved the start, and alongside Sullivan, because that partnership still needs to continue to develop, whether they're with the ball in the attack looking to break down a low block or a deep defensive sitting team that Ireland showed, or if they're defensively trying to structure with a pivot or sliding as 2 6s or a 6 and an 8, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think maybe there was a small part of me that would have liked to see Robin get the start, only to sort of see her play with Sanchez and at the national team level, like within the system. Like, I think so often we've seen either of those two players kind of come in and asked to be like impact players off the bench, which kind of really showed us early on like what the roles that they were being looked at for this team moving forward. But with injury, also comes the other side of that is opportunity for other players. And so maybe we will get to see that for club, if anything else. But I'm happy that both of them got at least some extended minutes in a game like this. As far as the game as a whole, I mean, we're talking about a 1-0 scoreline for this United States team against Ireland. Yeah, they get the series sweep. They've got 2 wins. But 2 entirely different games, right? I think that we're looking at here. Getting to watch it live as well, I think it's always a bit different. United States women's national team, not as bad, in person. I think there's a lot of folks out there that are like, this is terrible, like this is not good. And I think it's evident from game 1 to game 2, especially all things considered with that really horrific injury to Mallory Swanson. It was pretty evident that there was probably a bit of a check-in. Some conversations were probably had, and you had 2 teams going into this second match just looking and feeling very different from that first game that they had against each other. Even looking at just sort of some of the final stat lines for these 2 teams in the final game, I mean, mostly even in terms of the play between them. 10 shots for the United States versus 9 from Ireland, each of them getting 2 attempts on target. Possession, not that huge of a gap between them, with the United States at 53% and Ireland at 47%. And the corners as well. I mean, Ireland, a team that, wants to try to continue to get looks, and special plays and set pieces. So 5 corners for them compared to 4 for the United States. And I think like the corner kicks is something that this team is really trying to get back and make sure that that's like an X factor in their arsenal. And for the United States, I think it's safe to say that they've kind of struggled or gotten away from their lethal looks right off of corners. But something that did come out of this game was, even though we didn't see too much come off of these, I liked some of the plays that were drawn up on the corners that came out of this game specifically. I mean, we saw that wild 3 minutes in.
It was the Becky play. It was the Becky Sauerbrunn corner kick play.
Off the post. It was like, listen, all I have to say is that everybody reacted to that. The crowd was very appropriately reacted to that moment. And there were folks everywhere, even some who were covering the game that were like, "Oh my goodness, like what a play!" So smart. But I
He
mean,
knew there was a play. Even after the first match, he said, "Hey, we had a play drawn up for Becky to get a goal, and Ireland defended our corner as well." I mean, he's been very vocal about being transparent about what they're doing behind the scenes. Maybe he felt a lot of the scrutiny and was like, "I got to be a little more honest, let people know what I'm thinking." But we got to see the play, the corner kick play drawn up for Becky Sauerbrunn to get the goal. And I mean, she comes inches away from finding the back of the net, inches in the opening 3 minutes of this game. I mean, the play was executed very well. Her header was great, put on frame, and it just hits the crossbar. I mean, just 2 inches lower and it goes in.
well, I mean, we even think about like the one goal that came out of this game, right? It's this kind of wild setup for Alana Cook. I mean, that comes off of a broken set piece, essentially. The ball gets, Sophia Smith is taking the corner kicks now. We saw that happening in this game. That was a Mal Swanson specialty. Smith is now over the ball in these moments. So we're already seeing that adjustment for this team. But the ball gets delivered in a brief clearance by Ireland, but USA retains possession. It gets recycled around. It goes to Alana Cook way outside, like near the halfway circle, and she just tries some stuff. I love that. If this is the type of game to do that, and she just sends a lofty ball in. Gotta love the shot cross when it happens.
Did she mean to do that? Did she mean to find the back of the net? Because I think she was looking for Herrera.
Of course. I think if you're Alana Cook, you say of course, I am. But
yes, don't deny it at that point. But I mean, honestly, like as much of it was great from Alana Cook. Like this is fantastic to play a dangerous ball in your goalkeeper for Ireland out of position, and she's not able to get onto it. But it also comes down to Lindsay Horan making that run. Running at the goalkeeper as she's trying to save this ball, it throws her off a little bit, and that helps it find the back of the net. Like I think without the ball serviced in, of course, there's no goal. But I also kind of think without the run, the penetrating run from Lindsay Horan, there's no goal. Then maybe it becomes a little bit of an easier save. Really, team play there.
I mean, you just sort of see like you're serving this very, very long ball into the box. It kind of catches the keeper out of position and it just sort of waves into goal. I mean, there's enough for Bronson tries to get some fingertips on it, right? But there's just enough trajectory there and enough of an awkward angle to just that it ends up in the back of the net. It's almost like, okay, well, considering how this series against Ireland has been going, maybe that's not surprising. Maybe it's not surprising that the goal in this game didn't come from the attacking line. It's coming from defenders. And I think all things considered, if you're trying to build towards a World Cup, maybe that's an area where you're like, okay, let's make sure that we are still getting our, attacking players.
Is that a concern that in these two friendlies, the goals coming from two defenders from well outside the box, not even on like set piece corner kicks? That's one. Right. If I'm just reading a scoreline and I don't watch a game and I see Emily Fox and then Alana Cook get a goal, I'm like, oh, this was a corner kick or this was a set piece, not necessarily shots from distance. And then the third goal coming from a PK. Is that a concern at all to you that the forwards did not score in these two friendlies?
I'm looking at it more from what we've seen over the last three camps from this team. I mean, the attacking line has looked fine. But something that did come out of this 2-game series was the fact that Mal Swanson is no longer available. So I think out of these 2 games specifically, yeah, you're going to say, oh my God, not a single, impactful moment from your attacking line, which I don't necessarily agree with. I thought Alyssa Thompson actually was really good in this game.
Yeah, I'm not impactful. I mean, they definitely made an impact and they created chances and they got close. But the fact that 3 of the goals came from a penalty kick and then defenders.
I think if you're looking at just these 2 games, you're like, oh my God, this is a problem. But I think you kind of have to take a look at the first 4 months of this year and sort of know kind of how they got to this moment in these two games. So
and if Swanson doesn't get injured in the first game, I think it's a completely different
yeah,
story. And we can't play that what if game.
no, I'm in agreement with you.